morning
Good
or
morning.
afternoon, whatever it is in your
Jonathan
time
just
zone.
had a child and he's here for us anyway. He's not even worried about that. He's bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, ready to give a solid hour here.
Not underslept at all.
No, top of his game. Well, that's great. Okay, so you're going to kick us off if you're ready. I think we can just run with it. And
yeah, you can hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you good. Looks good.
Good. All right, I will share my screen here.
Yep, do that. We'll make sure that's good, and then we'll get out of the way. Okay.
Good.
Looks good. I'll see you in a bit.
All right. All right, hello everyone. I'm just gonna move this window out of the way here for a sec. All right. So yeah, hi, and today I'm hoping to speak with you all about Eloquent and performance stuff. This is something that I've talked about a lot. If you watched my Laracon talk in Laracon Online talk in 2018, I talked about this. If you saw my Laracon talk in New York last year, I talked about this. And today I'm going to be talking about it more because it's a hot topic for me, something I enjoy digging into because I think performance and database performance in particular is something that we all have to face every day as we build applications. Unless you're building an app that doesn't use a database, this talk is going to be relevant for you, which I suspect is pretty much everybody. I'm going to follow a similar format that I've done at my previous two Laracons, and that's where I work on a demo app and we kind of work through some requirements and kind of build up the app as we go. And I'm going to kind of live code it, but again, it's mostly just like I have a document with a bunch of snippets that I'm going to copy and paste, and we're going to work through that. And I feel like that's a nice way to do it because it's a lot of code and you guys don't want to see me typing. And I've said before, I'm not the best typer. So that's how we're going to do it. Some of this stuff, there is some crossover from previous talks and definitely crossover from my blog posts. So if you followed any of my articles on my website, there's definitely going to be a lot of stuff being pulled from that. In particular, I'm going to touch on the dynamic relationships again using subqueries. But I'm going to go through that pretty quickly because I have talked about it a couple times already. The reason I want to touch on it again today is because as of Laravel 6, there's better subquery support that's been added to the framework, in particular for adding select subqueries and adding order by subqueries. So I kind of want to go through some of that. And then I have a couple new items as well. Yeah, so let me give you a quick walk through the app. The app that I built is called Wants. I'm going to leave it at that zoom level here. I just want to make sure everyone can see this, but yeah, so the app is called Wants. And what this app is it is a feature request management app. So if you run a software product or software business, you'll know that you get lots and lots of feature requests for your product. And this little app here basically is a way for people to submit feature requests and a way for you to keep track of votes for those feature requests and comments and kind of mark out which ones are requested and which ones are completed and which ones you plan to do. So it's kind of structured a little bit like GitHub issues, but so I call it wants because they're features that people or customers might want. So we're going to pretty much be taking a look mostly at the dashboard today. But there is a secondary page that we'll also look at. So here's the feature called Add Two-Factor Authentication. And you can see that it's been upvoted 246 times and a bunch of comments in it. So this is just we'll look at the dashboard in this page and kind of make some optimizations. I really like dashboards when it comes to talking about performance because these are really the pages that people run into a lot of performance issues with because they tend to pull in a bunch of content from a bunch of different parts of the app, a lot of different database queries. And like when you're looking at a single page, you're working with less data, right? But when you're working at like kind of the summary page, I think it's really important that we get the security right, or not the security, the performance right on these pages because they tend to be the pages that get hit most often as well, right? So if you got performance issues on your dashboard, and your dashboard is the main place that your users are going to, or at least the first page they're landing on, those performance are gonna, that's gonna hurt your database and that's gonna hurt your overall application performance. Okay, so that's the app itself. Let me just show you the database. It's pretty simple. I can't zoom in on these sides, so you'll just have to trust me. If you can't read them, I'll just tell you what it is. So users, this is a very basic standard Laravel stock users table with one addition of just a photo. We have the wants themselves, which include a title and a slug and their status, and also the category that they're linked to. So the categories, I just preceded it with 8 categories. So like billing or a bug or integrations or security or UI and UX. So that's some example categories. And then there's 2 in particular interesting tables. We have comments, which is comments that people have made on a particular feature request. So that's all of these. And I've seeded 6,500 of those, so quite a few of those. And then I also have a bunch of votes in here as well. I have 30,000 votes added. So, and sorry, I should have mentioned that of the wants, I preceded with 250 wants as well. So hopefully this is enough data to kind of give us a bit of a sense of, kind of any performance issues that we might run into. So I'll keep this open, but I'm just gonna throw in the background for now. Okay, so to kind of kick it off, I wanted to start by talking about the Laravel Debug Bar. Sort of like the main thing that I think people, well, if you're not doing, I'm surprised how many people don't use the Laravel Debug Bar. So I thought I should just kind of start by highlighting how important and how useful this tool is. The Laravel Debug Bar is basically a tool that runs in your application when you're in development mode that shows you a bunch of different metrics about your application. So it shows you how many database queries you've run. It shows you how much memory you're using. It shows you how long the page took to load, and a bunch of other information that you can use to kind of diagnose or see potential issues. Because the problem is a lot of times when we're developing applications is in development mode, we have some seed data, but we don't necessarily have a ton of data. So we're not necessarily locally going to experience performance issues. A lot of times the performance issues that we run into happen when we push our application into production. And the application initially feels fast, but then over time we start going from hundreds of records, tens of or thousands of records to tens of thousands of database records. And that's when we start to experience the problems in our application. Quite often they're not noticeable when we're working in local development. And so using the Laravel Debug Bar, we're able to kind of like get a bit of insight into any problems that we might have, problems that we never notice on, say, page load. Because if a page takes 100 milliseconds to load locally or 200 milliseconds to load locally, that is like pretty much unnoticeable to us. But to in reality, there might be actually a serious performance problem even already showing itself locally at that point, and that's where this can be useful. So I've already installed it, so we don't have to wait for Composer to install. So you basically just go to the Laravel Debug Bar. It's on GitHub, and they have an install thing here. And when it installs, you have to make sure it only shows up, as mentioned, when you got app debug set to true. And one other thing that I'd like to show people how to do, I actually, after my Laracon US talk, I added a little feature to Laravel Debug Bar, and that's model counts. So let me show you this. So I'm just gonna run PHP artisan vendor publish. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna publish the config for the Laravel Debug Bar, and then I'm just gonna pull that open. So in the config here, pull up the debug bar, and if we scroll down and we look right here. So in this section here, collectors, these are all the different pieces of data that the debug bar is grabbing and recording for you. And you can see there's a whole bunch of them here, a bunch of them that are enabled by default. And so we have this new models one, which is what I added. So we're just gonna turn that to true, hit save, go back, reload this page here, and we should see it. So models right here. So models is this really kind of handy little thing. And what it does is it keeps track of all the Eloquent models that get hydrated for that request. And what I mean by that is, I mean that they get downloaded from the database and they get converted into an Eloquent model. And whenever that happens, we keep track of what model it is and how many times it's happened. So you can see right now on our dashboard here, we have 15 wants loaded, which makes sense because we're paginating the results. So we have 15 results for this page. And of those 15 results, they were showing categories. So there's 7 categories. So between the 15, there's 7 categories. So that's why we're getting those values there. It makes a lot of sense. The reason I like the models value metrics so much is because a lot of times our performance issues don't even necessarily stem from from our database queries themselves. a lot of times our database queries, we may not even have that many database queries, and we may not even be running, they may be very fast database queries. But the problem is, just because you have a few, not too many database queries, and just because they're running fast doesn't mean that you don't have serious performance issues. Because what could be happening is you could be actually downloading and getting way too much data. So the way you previously kind of identify this would be within the memory usage. But I find the memory usage one isn't great, because the memory usage kind of includes the framework's memory usage, PHP's, everything that's kind of like all going on within the request. So it's kind of like not a great metric to see the memory usage go from 4.65 to 4.7 may not seem like a big deal at all, but that actually could, again, be a really good indication of an indication of a performance issue, but it's not very obvious. And that's why I really prefer the models, because the models will identify if we're getting too much data from the database. Okay, enough about that. Let's get into kind of our first requirement. So yeah, I guess kind of like as we go through this, our goals are going to be like, it's always 3 goals for me. Whenever I'm building my application from a performance perspective, my goals are 1, minimize database queries, 2, minimize hydrated models, and 3, minimize memory usage. So I'm always keeping an eye on those 3 metrics. Okay, enough. Let's get into it. So let's start by saying the requirement is show status totals on the dashboard. So I'm just going to try to make this a little bit bigger yet, so hopefully everyone can see this. And we're going to start by going to our wants blade. So I should maybe show you first. We have a wants controller here. Okay, so this wants controller is our dashboard, and that has an index, that'd be our dashboard, and a show endpoint. So that's when we look at a specific want. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to edit this page right here, and we want to show at the top here some totals of how many have been requested, how many wants have been requested, how many have been planned, and how many have been completed. So let me just do that and scroll down. Actually, we're going right here. So again, this is why like copying and pasting code is great, because you don't really need me to explain all this HTML. It's just HTML, and I'm using Tailwind to style it. So I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty details of how I make the design, because that's not really the focus of this talk. But that's kind of why I'm doing it this way. So, okay. So we've now added 3 labels on here: requested, planned, and completed. Okay. And I've just defaulted them all to 10. That's hard-coded in. So let's go figure out how we'd actually now update this to show the real values. So we'll kind of start with like a poor approach, and then kind of improve it from there. So the first thing we're going to do is in our actual wants controller, we're just going to go in here. Oops, wrong one, wrong method. Right here, we're going to go like that. And we are going to now grab this as well. So this is kind of like just a silly way to do it. Not really a smart way to do it, but again, starting bad, and we'll improve it from there. So what we're going to do is we want to figure out the total. So we're going to literally grab every single want from the database, all 250 of them. We're going to create an object, and then we're going to iterate, and we're going to go through each one of these things, each of these collections, and we're going to say, put a where statement on the collection, and to get the requested ones, the planned ones, and the completed one, and then put count on it. Okay, and that's it. And then we're going to fire that over to our template, and then we'll update our template to actually show these values. Okay, and put the first, all right, 10, 10, and all right, so there we go. That's all in there, and this should work. Okay, perfect. 170, 21, 59. And so that works, right? But obviously there's some issues here. One, it's really silly to use paginated results for our wants to limit, we use pagination for performance, right? So we're only showing 15 wants on this page, but here we are literally loading every single want in the entire database just to get this value. So this is not very smart. It's nice because we've only introduced 1 extra database query. You can see here right away this models thing. You can see now we're loading 265 models. And you might be wondering, well, why 265? Don't we have 250 wants in our database? And we do. But the problem is, and this is why I love this feature, is we have the 15 that are being loaded from the database in our paginated list, but then we have the 250 that are being loaded for the top here. And that's why we're getting 265. So this is obviously a major issue. This won't work, because you're going to definitely, if this app increases to 1,000 or 10,000 feature requests, like this is going to be a real performance issue. So that's bad. So a better way of doing it in this situation would be to actually just literally create like an n+1 issue. And sometimes +1's okay, where we basically say, instead of getting them all and then using collection wheres, we just say, you know what, we're going to make 3 database queries, 1 to get a count on the requested, 1 to get the count on the planned, and 1 to get the count on the completed. So we do this, hit reload here, and this is better, right? Yeah, we have 2 more database queries. We're now up to 6 database queries, right? 1 query for each of these summaries. But at least our models are back to where they were. We're not hydrating any extra models. We just have our want and our categories, which are used below. So that's better, but still not great, because you could have a page that has, you know, 6 of these or 8 of these summaries, or if you go this approach, it can really start adding up depending on your application. So let's take another approach. And this is, this approach is called conditional aggregates. And I wrote a blog post about this as well. So see my blog for more info on that. But let me just walk you through the real basic version here. So what we're doing is we're making a single database query. And so you guys are all, I'm sure, familiar, obviously, with just count, right? So you'd say, if you just did something like this, you'd say, okay, I want all the wants, and just give me the count, and then call that count total, alias that count to total. So we're familiar with this count star thing. We see that even in Laravel quite a bit, okay? But what you may not realize is that count can actually take a condition in it. So this is, what we can say is case, when status is requested, then 1, when status is planned, then 1, and completed 1. So we basically just give it a 1, and if it's not, then that condition will actually resolve to null and won't be counted. So by doing it this way, we can run 1 database query now, and this will work in the exact same way. So now we just have 1 database query that runs for all 3 of them, and then that comes back automatically with 3 keys in it, or 3 properties in it for each of our requests, or for each of our statuses. So let me just show you what this actually looks like if we were to just run this right in Postico. Okay, run this.
Jonathan?
Yeah.
That's the voice of God here. A request to slow down just a hair.
All right, so I can slow down, but I may not get through it. So fair comment. I have a lot of content here today, folks. So I am known for going fast, and I do have a lot to get through, but I would say, like, I will try to slow down, but I would say all this code I should have mentioned right off.
We have the videos too, so that's true. We have the videos.
We have the videos. And also, if you want to follow along with me at github/Reinink/wants, REININK/wants, you can actually follow along. This is a public repo, so you'll be able to follow along with me on here.
Beautiful.
I know. Yeah, so that might help. I feel like if I don't keep moving, I'm not going to get through it. So I would say I keep moving, and then just follow along here, and then watch the talk again afterwards to kind of take it all in.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks, Ian. So so I'm going to just zoom in here. So I ran this query that it generated, so that our conditional aggregates. And you can see here that it came back with those 3 values that we wanted here. So that's how that works. So that's a little trick that you can use if you have a summary page where you want some sort of totals of some statuses, and you don't want to do it in a bunch of different database queries. You can use that. And again, on my blog, it's calculating totals in Laravel using conditional aggregates, and I kind of go through all this. And I also show, if you're using Postgres, I even show a neat little approach that is possible. Postgres has first class support for this. It's called filters. So check that out if you're on Postgres, definitely. Okay. That's requirement 1 done. We have 4, so we have 3 more to go, folks. I will try not to go too fast, but I do feel, again, like I know I'm already pushing time. So hopefully you guys can just watch it after again if you need to. Okay, so this next requirement is actually on our want page. So I'm going to pull up our 2-factor authentication want. And we got 2 requirements. We want to make the comments link. So we want to make it so that if you click on the dates here, it converts those into links so that we can link directly to a specific comment. And the other thing we want to do is we want to show an author label. So down here, we can see that Gordon is the author of this want right here. And we want Gordon we wanted to show just like a little author badge here if he's the author. So you can kind of see when the author has responded to his own want. So, and I'm going to use this to kind of illustrate this problem that I've been talking about a little bit recently on Twitter and on my blog, which is called circular relationships and some of the challenges that you can run into with them. So let's start with the URL, okay? So we need to make these links right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by in our comment model. I'm going to create a new helper in the comment model for this. And it's just going to be, let me paste this in. It's just going to be a URL. And what this does is it actually points to our want model. So this comment has a want relationship because all comments belong to a want. And if we look at that want model, we'll see that it also has a URL. And this URL in this application is special because it includes the ID and it includes the category slug in the URL and also the actual want slug. So if we go back here now, you can see wants, ID 7, category slug security, and then the want slug add two-factor authentication. We do this because it looks nice and whatever, maybe SEO benefits, whatever. So that's the feature of this app. And so what we're going to do is in our comment, we're going to say, give us the want URL because that's where all the comments are listed on this page, but then append a hash to it for the actual comment on that page. Okay. So now let's go ahead and update our want blade file as well for that page. And let's go down and I'll show you here. We're going to go down to where it iterates through all the comments and we're going to go to the date. So the date's right here. Okay. So that's the date that's outputted right here. And we're just going to replace it here with, all we're going to do is add a link to it. And that's going to use the comment URL. Okay. And then if we just refresh, let's actually just refresh right away there. You can see already that works now. So let me just show you here. So we now have the ability to link to these specific comments, which is cool, right? But the problem is we've introduced an N+1 issue. So you can look, if we look here in our queries, we can see that if we look, we got 83 queries and before, what did we actually have before? We had 5 before and now we're up to 83. So that's because for every one of these, we are loading the want and the category for every single comment. And that kind of makes sense, right? Because when you look at this, we're saying, okay, for the comment, give us the URL. And then we go to the URL method, and that's referencing in that comment model instance, it's referencing the want model, which is loading the want relationship, lazily loading it and grabbing the URL. And the URL in the want URL, so in the want model, the URL is referencing category, which is then being lazily loaded, which is why we're seeing want category, want category, want category over and over and over. And that's because of the way we built it. If we had just put this URL generation straight into our template, we wouldn't have run into this problem. But it's because we put that into our models as helpers that we run into these performance issues. Because if it was in the template, we could just use the want instance that we have there. And we could use the category instance that we have there, and we wouldn't kind of have all these problems. The thing about it is, in a real application, it's really, really nice to have helpers like this URL helper, and I'll show you another one in a moment. So I really like to be able to create these and not have to worry about kind of all these performance issues. And I'd like to be able to create these without having to like push this work into my template or my blade file. So what we can do right away to kind of like mitigate this problem a little bit is eager load the want. So let's update our wants controller, and we're on the show page here, right? So right now we're already eager loading the comments and all the users for those comments, right? So comment user. So that's all being already eager loaded. So let's just do some more eager loading. What we're going to do now is we're going to eager load the users just like before. I'm just going to change the format of this a little bit. We're going to keep using eager loading the users, but then we're also going to eager load the want as well. Okay, so if we reload this now we're down to 7 database queries. So that's a lot better. And it's 7 database queries now because it's loading the want once, and it's loading the category once, and that for each comment, because all the comments share the same category and the same want. It'll only make essentially two extra database queries. But to me, I kind of still hate it because we're still making 2 extra database queries kind of for nothing, because we technically have the category available to us already. We already have that want available because they're available to us right here. Our route model binding is loading the want. So to reload the want is kind of pointless. It's not giving us any extra benefit, right? So it's this is kind of like one of these situations where like you want to use these helper methods, but you run into these like circular relationship issues, and it's kind of like hard to solve. And I'll show you kind of like how this can get like even worse. This is a simple example, but let me just back this up here to where it was, and then let me show you how this could get even worse. So now, remember I said originally that we want to show like the author badge, right? So we want to have Gordon here have a little author badge show up beside his name. So this is tricky in this application, because in this application, we only know who the author is based on whoever wrote the first comment. And to figure out the first comment, we're sorting by date. Now, in a real application, you'd probably just cache the current, the author of that want in the actual database. So this is a bit of a contrived example, but this is definitely, I'm using it to keep it simple. So I'm going to just bear with me, understanding that you probably would cache the value if it was a real application, but just to kind of serve as an example here. And this is definitely a problem that I've run into in my own application. So this is a very useful principle that I'm going to show you. So just kind of bear with me on the contrived example a little bit. So we need to figure out on a per comment basis whether or not that comment is from the author. So let's start by updating our template. We're going to go to the the want blade file again. And right here under the date, like right under this date here, we're going to paste this in. And all this does is it says, if the comment is the author, then put that label there. And I'll just remove the conditional here for a second to show you what this is going to look like. So there you can see author, right? And it's showing it from all because we removed the conditional, but that's what we're going for. Okay, so let's put the conditional back, and now let's write this helper method. So we're going to put this helper method on the comment model, okay? So let's go over here. I've written this out. So I'm going to grab the isAuthor helper method, paste it in there, and we have this want. So we're referencing the want relationship on the comment model. We're going to get all the comments for that want. Then we're going to sort them by the created at date. We're going to get the first one because we want the first one, right? Then we're going to grab the user for that first comment, which in this case is going to be Gordon, right? And we're going to say, is that the same user as the user for this particular comment? So is Telly here Gordon? Wow, there's some crazy names in here. Is Gordon? Well, yes, So we're going to go through kind of each one by one and say, is that person? But you can see here, we're really getting the circular relationship land here, because we're now referencing want, which is referencing comments, which is kind of funny because we're literally in the comment model. Okay, so let's see if this works. And it definitely does. Okay, so this is great. It works. We have author, and down here we can see Gordon is the author, and that's working. But look what we've done here. We now are running 161 database queries, and we're up to 1,714 models being hydrated here. So most of them being comments. And that makes sense, because let's look at what we're actually doing here. What we're actually doing, this is what we have, okay? So this is a little bit confusing, but kind of just think. We have want, right, which is the want that we get from our route model binding for this page. Then we're getting the category to show the category up here, the security category there. Then we're getting the comments to actually list all the comments. Then we're getting the user to display the user there, right? Their name and their photo and stuff. And then we're actually within comments, we're getting the want again. And the reason why is because we need the category for the link, right? That we talked about earlier. And we need the comments again, so we can determine who the first comment was made by. And then we need the user within that comment to double check to see if it's the same user. So it's like really, really like getting nested here. And like, if you look at all this, you're like, what we really want to get rid of is all this, right? This is really what we want down here. We just want the want, we want the category, we want the comments and the users. But because we're using these helper methods, which that are using their own relationships to figure things out, like want here, and the want using the category relationship within the want model, we're running into all these kind of like circular performance issues which is like really hard to fix. Now, one thing we can do, obviously, is we could go in here and we could do want, and we could do .comments here. So we could say, okay, we want to get the comment, and then the comments, and then the user for that comment, and then the want for that comment, and then the comments for that want, and then the user for those comments. And if we do that, like our database query issues go away. We're down to 9 database queries. But now it's like, it just kind of seems ridiculous. We're making 9 database queries all just because we wanted these helper methods in our models. So the models themselves are okay, but we are loading the want twice, which is unnecessary, and we're loading the category twice, which is unnecessary. But that doesn't even really bother me. What bothers me is the fact that we need 4 extra database queries, and we're kind of doing all this eager loading just to do that. So a really cool trick that you can use is this thing called the set relation helper. So I'm just going to get rid of this whole eager load here, and we're going to go back to where we were actually. I'll just back it up. So we're going to go like this, and then we're going to add this extra little line here. So what we're going to do is we're going to load, again, we're eager loading the comments and the users for this page, comments and the users. But what we're going to do is we're going to iterate through each one of those things. So instead of lazily loading, instead of eager loading all that data, all that extra want data that we need for those helper methods, what we're going to do is we're going to be smarter about it. We're going to do Laravel's work for it. We're going to say for each comment, call the set relationship method on it and pass through the current instance of want that we already have in memory here, right? And set relation is really simple. It's found in the has relationships trait within the Eloquent code base. And set relation is basically what gets called after Laravel loads a relationship from the database. It basically loads a relationship, sets a relationship name. So that's whatever the relationship model name or method name is. So in our case, we're loading the want relationship on the comment model. And so so that'll be the want would be the name, and the value is just the actual model itself, the want model. So that can be a collection, that could be a single model, whatever, right? So what we're doing is we're essentially making it so that Laravel does not have to reload this want from the database. So let's look at what this does. Reload this page, and you can see now that we're down to 5 database queries. So we've gone down 4 database queries. And our models are exactly what we'd expect. We have 1 want, we have 1 category, we have 39 comments, and we have 35 users. So we're loading the minimal amount of data possible from the database. There's no extra eager loading that needs to be done, and we're not loading any extra models, and we still get all the benefits of being able to create nice helper methods like these within our models. So to me, I think that's a real win, because I really like to be able to use and reference my relationships within my models. Like I like to be able to do that because it makes for like really, really clean, understandable code. And I don't want my models to have to be thinking about or having to worry about performance. And the reason why is because they're not really well suited. They're too far down into my application to really understand what sort of eager loading or like how to optimize the database queries. Should it be eager loaded, or should it run a database query itself? I kind of just avoid all that stuff, and I just literally use it as if there's no database involved here. Like I really write my model helpers as if all the data already exists in memory. And then I leave it to the perimeter of my application, my controller, to really figure out, well, what's the most optimal way of loading this data? Is the most optimal way kind of doing what we were doing before, where we were eager loading each one, or is the most optimal way using set relationship or set relation? It's going to be different in every single app and every single endpoint. But I like having my perimeter have to worry about that and not have my models concerned with that at all. And you can take this farther, right? So I'll show you one last little example, kind of what you can do here. So I have a situation in my app recently where I had a page like this, and the users themselves had tons and tons of data. So my SaaS app, the user model has like 50 columns on it, just a lot of different user data. So you'd have a page like this, which is showing these 35 different users, and all it needs is the ID for the user, the photo, and their name. But you may have all this extra data that's all going to be coming along with it. So what you can do in a situation like this, which I don't see done very often, but can really, really be an awesome performance optimization, is to literally just say, I only want 3 columns. So there's this cool syntax you can use when eager loading data in Laravel where you put a colon after the relationship name and you just pass it a comma separated list of columns. So in this situation here, I'm saying, okay, on this page for the users, I only want the ID, the name, and the photo. And now if I reload this, it still all works perfectly. So if we look at our queries here, we can see that when we load these users here, we're selecting ID, name, and photo. So previously, if I redo this, you can see it's loaded, select star from users. Now it's saying select ID, name, and photo from users. So pretty neat little optimization that you don't necessarily want to reach for all the time because you got to be very careful when you do it, especially if you have helper methods that rely on that data. But if you know for a fact that an endpoint only needs 3 columns and you have a page that's showing a ton of data and you're loading way more data from the database than you need, and all that's being passed over the wire, this is a nice way to kind of like simplify and minimize the amount of data that's coming back. And again, really, really well suited to be done from your controller level, from that perimeter of your application, because this endpoint here knows exactly what's happening down the line. It knows what's happening in the models and it knows what's happening in the views, and it can optimize the database loading perfectly for that endpoint. All right. Close some of this out. Requirement number 3. We're going to add, so let's go back to the dashboard here. And what we want to do is we want to update this table to show the last comment. So whoever made the last comment, we literally just want to show their face and their name and the time that they made the last comment, because we want to get a sense of like, well, how active is this particular want, okay? So let's just first make some changes to the markup just to get it in there, and then we'll look at kind of how we're going to implement this. So we're going to open up our wants blade file again. That's just file right here, and we'll paste this in. So let's go down to right here. So don't worry again too much about this code. It's just HTML and some styling. And go down a little bit further. I'm just punting in another column. Okay, reload this. Here we go. So we have last comment here, which I've just dubbed in my face and name and a date, kind of just to show you what we're after here, right? So each one of these, so every single want has comments, and we just want to show the last one. So if you've watched my previous talks, you'll know that I've really recommended using subqueries in these situations. And in particular, dynamic relationships based on a subquery, where you go and you use a subquery to get the ID of whatever that entity of that relationship you want, in this case, the last comment, and then you use that ID as a dynamic relationship. But before we get into that, let's show you kind of how you might naively try to tackle this problem. So let's start by saying, okay, well, we know that a want has many one. So we're going to do some sorting. So let's start by doing this in PHP, which again, I always start here, but I'm always pushing, we always kind of start in PHP because it's easy to do there. And then I kind of like, I really prefer to do this work in the database because the database is just a lot more performant and you can just load a lot less data from the database. So, but yeah, okay. So let me go into our want model. And what we're going to do is we're going to create an assessor here down at the bottom. And that's the get last comment attribute. Okay. And what this again, we're going to reference a relationship in this model. We're going to say, well, give me all the comments for this want, sorted by the date, and get the first one. So we're sorting by descending. Because we want the last comment. Okay. So then let's update our blade view again. So we're just going to do this in 2 steps. So let's go to the blade view here and let's show like where my name is and the date here. We're going to replace those first. So we're just going to say want last comment user name, want last comment created at, and then we're going to format the date. And then we'll also here add the photo, and I'll just replace my mug with that. So want last comment user photo to get the URL. Okay. And we know already if this will work, by the way. So if we reload this is good. This will work. But we can see an issue right away. We've introduced an n+1 issue, and we know that because we're now lazily loading the comments and the users for each one of these wants. So that's an easy n+1 to get rid of. So let's go ahead and eager load the comments and the users. So let's go to our wants controller. We'll go back to our index method. And in here, we're going to do that. So we're going to update this. So we're going to now eager load comments.users. And if we reload that here, we're back down to 6 database queries. That's great. But you can see our models are like off the chart, right? We're loading tons and tons of models. And that's because we're, for all 15 of the wants on the going off, and we're loading all their comments and all the users for those comments, all just so that we can show the last comment. So you can see how this is like a bit of a problem, and this problem gets a lot worse if you're not careful, because like what happens if we increase the pagination here? Like this page, we're showing 15 right now, but let's throw it up to 100, okay? Reload this page, and now, okay, we have 100 wants listed on this page, which doesn't seem totally unreasonable to do. We're still only at 6 database queries, so this isn't a real, there's no real major database query issue here. But if we look at our models here, we're now loading 2,500 comments, you know, and that's a real problem. Like that's no good. So we need to do a better, we need to do this in a better way. So again, like one way you might do this is you might, within your wants table, you might actually have a column in your database called last comment ID. And if you had a last comment ID, well, then you could create a proper relationship for that last comment. So let's look at what that might look like. So let's go back to our want now, and let's just get rid of this last comment attribute, and let's replace it with what would be a normal model, okay? So we're just going to call it last comment. And if you know kind of like the standard Laravel relationship standard here for a belongs to, this expects on the wants table there to be a last comment ID column, which obviously doesn't exist. Now you could make it exist, but that's now a form of caching that you now need to maintain. And I think in a lot of situations you can get away without doing that caching and by using a subquery. So this is kind of where we get into the subquery land. So let's look at what that would take to do. Let's create a scope for this subquery that we're going to run. So I'm going to go to my want model again, and I'm just going to paste this scope in here, and I'm going to call this scope with last comment ID. Because again, what we're looking for is to get last comment ID so that we can make this last comment relationship work, right? So let's paste this in, and let's have a look at what's happening here. So this is the new feature in Laravel 6 that we added that says add select, and if you pass it a name with either a query builder instance or a closure that returns a query builder instance, Eloquent will automatically execute this as a subquery. So what we're going to basically say is we want users, and then we want to add last comment ID onto that. And that last comment ID, well, where are we going to get that from? We're going to get that from comment. We're going to say comment, select the ID, where the column is the comment.want ID. So we're going to basically match the comment want IDs with the want ID that we're currently running the query for, right? Because we're in the want model right now. So we're basically just saying, give me all the comments for this want is all that this is essentially saying. And then we're going to do latest, which is going to do an order by on the created at attribute, right? So if we look in the database here, we have created at right here. So that's what we want to order by. And then we want to take one, because anytime you run a subquery can only ever return one single value. So if there was 5 comments or 10 comments, that would return 10 comments here, and that would create an SQL error. So we're just going to grab one, because all we care about is that one that we're after, the last comment ID. Okay, so this is how you set up a dynamic relationship. So let's look at how we now actually use that dynamic relationship. We now need to go to our wants controller. So we're currently eager loading all these comments and users. So we're going to get rid of that, because that's kind of our old way. And we're going to update this eager load to use kind of like the smarter way, the ideal way, which is to say that we want to eager load the last comment. So only the last comment and the user for that last comment. So now if we were to run this, we should get an error, right? Because it's going to try to load that last comment, but we haven't actually run the subquery yet. So we need to actually add the subquery. We need to add the scope that we added. So, and then that's pretty straightforward. You just add it like this. So back in here, so right before or anywhere in this really, we can just say include the scope with last comment ID. Okay, and now let's rerun this here again. And now we're in a much better situation. We're down to only 6 database queries, and we're down to only 100. Oh, yeah, I'm gonna actually remove the pagination. We're gonna default back to 15 here. So we're down to 52 models. So we have 15 wants. We have the 7 categories like we always have. We now only have 15 comments and the 15 users for those comments. So we have the minimal amount of data needed for this page, and we're doing that over 6 database queries. So let me just show you this query that actually got run here for 2 seconds. I'm gonna go and actually run this right in Postico again here. If I run this, I'm not gonna try to explain all the nitty gritty, but you'll see kind of what's happening. So this is all the data that's coming back from the wants, select wants, from the wants query. And you can see here, it's got all like the standard columns, like the title and the slug and the category ID and the stats. It also has our count and our comments count, which I'm using to display the counts here, which you can see I do that right here with count. But we also have this last comment ID column, okay? And this is the intro. This is what we've added. And this is what Laravel's then using. So we're running this query. Laravel's grabbing all these last comment IDs, and then it's going off and it's eager loading all those so we don't have this N+1 issue. So that's how this works. So that's a super, super powerful technique that I use a lot in my applications that can give you access to some sort of relationship, version of a relationship that you can't do kind of using a regular relationship unless you were to actually cache that relationship as an actual ID. So yeah, and a lot of times you do this with sorting type of things. So like trying to get the latest something or the oldest of something, kind of that's a typical use case for this kind of thing. So, and I want to just make one quick note. Sometimes you might even find it helpful to automatically always include that scope so that you don't even have to call with last comment ID. So let's just get rid of last comment ID here entirely. And let's go to our want model where we have this scope. Let's just go up to the top here and add in this. We're gonna add a boot function that adds a global scope that automatically loads this every single time for us. So we don't have to think about it. So anytime, there, I just reloaded here, it's the exact same thing. So if I just approve this to you that this is actually what's needed to make this work, there, it's busted. So this global scope is kind of like, now you don't have to think about it. Last comment ID will always be included. Now, I'll be honest, I don't tend to do this very often because if I'm going to have it automatically included every single time, I'd probably be inclined to look at caching it in the database. So this is typically something I use kind of like only when it's required, but it's still a neat idea that you can do this. And I'm pretty sure Taylor's going to show us later today that you can actually simplify this in Laravel 7 to just be booted. But yeah, I'll leave that for him to explain. Okay. So that is dynamic relationships, and that is how you get the last comment onto that page. Okay, we are ready for our last requirement. Grab a bit of water here. Requirement number 4. We want to add column sorting to the dashboard. So I love talking about sorting because sorting is like this problem that it's a little bit like pagination, and when you're trying to load data like this, sorting's easy to do in PHP, except when you're dealing with pagination, right? Because if we sort by, say, the category here, we sort by the status, that has to happen in the database layer if we're using pagination. Otherwise, the pagination would only, it only returns 15 records, and we'd sort based on those 15 records, and it'd be useless because it wouldn't be in the proper order, because it needs to sort the entire 250 wants and then do the pagination after that. So I really like finding ways to push sorting to the database layer, because really, in a way, you don't have a choice. If you want to use pagination, you do need to do this. So let's kind of end this talk off by working through each one of these columns and kind of look at how we would go about sorting them. So I already have kind of the logic in place where if you click on these headings, it automatically uses a query parameter, and it says sort equals whatever you click on. So sort equals activity, sort equals status, sort equals last comment, and sort equals category. None of the actual sorting's happening. So I'm clicking on no sorting's actually happening yet. I kind of have that stubbed into place so we don't have to think about it. It also puts this little down arrow in the template when you're sorting. So what we're going to worry about is kind of the Eloquent side of it, the database side. How do we actually implement that? So I'll show you kind of a chunk of code that I will often use in a situation like this. And I'm just going to paste it in here into my want my want query, and I'm going to just say right before the existing order by ID that we have, I'm going to say when the request has a sort query parameter set, well, then we're going to sort by whatever that value is. So this when helper is like this handy query builder helper where you can just give it any value and it does a Boolean check on it. And if it's true, or truthy, I should say, it's going to execute whatever is in this closure. And if it's not, it's just going to ignore it. So if you don't have any sort set, shoot, I need to do an import there. I knew I was going to forget that. Okay, so if you don't have any sort set, well, it's just going to display the page, totally ignore this, okay? But if you do have it set, well, then it's going to execute it. Okay, you get the idea. So, and I do a little switch statement here where I just say category, last comment, status, activity. And for each one of those, I'm calling a separate order by scope that we're going to create for each one of these, because each one of these is a little bit more complicated than just doing an order by column ID. We got to do some more interesting things to make that work because we're dealing with relationships and stuff. So let's just kind of rough that in. So let's add these three just as empty scopes to our want model. So let's go down after the other scope that we already created for our dynamic query. I'm going to paste those in, and we're going to work through kind of these each one by one. So this is enough now that it should actually be running the scope, but since there's nothing in them, they're not doing anything. So if I actually go here and click on category, it is running it. Just to prove that to you, just say hi and reload so you can see that it's running it. But again, there's no scope in here yet, so it's not doing anything. Okay, so for the want, for this column, we actually want to sort by the category itself. So like billing, security, UX, UI, bug, etc. So that's what we're gonna sort by that. Now the category is not like, we don't have a string of the category on the actual want table though. We have a category ID, a relationship ID, right? So we need to use a subquery if we want to actually sort by the category name. So let me show you how you do this. Again, this is another example of using a subquery, and this time an order by subquery. So let's go in here. I'm going to replace this code here. Order by scope, order by query. And what we're going to do is kind of similar to what we did earlier, but in this situation, we're going to say, give me the category, select the name, and then basically just do a check to say, give me the category for this particular want. And it does a where column check. Now you'll notice here that I'm not doing a limit one. And the reason why I'm not is because I don't have to, because it's a has one relationship or a belongs to relationship. So there's only ever one. So I don't have to worry about putting limit one. I could put limit one there, but it literally will make no difference because it'll only ever match one record. So that's why I can omit that here. So if we go here now, we hit run here, sure enough, it's sorting billing first. And if we go and we jump to the last page here, you can see that we have UI and UX last. So that sorting is working perfect. So that's a really nice, simple way to kind of sort by a relationship value, some value in another table. People have asked me in the past, can you not do this with a join? You can do this with a join, but there's a bunch of little gotchas in Laravel that you got to be careful with if you're going to do a join here. And it has to do with the fact that when you join, anytime you make a join in Laravel, it automatically appends all the columns from that join to the query. So if you think about it, you have wants.id. If you were to join in the categories, you'd also have categories, categories.id. And the problem here is what happens if you're not careful, if you don't specify the columns you want, what will end up happening is category ID will actually override the wants ID, and you'll end up with all the wrong IDs on your want models. So that's why I often don't use joins for this kind of thing, and I prefer a subquery because the subquery is nice and isolated. Okay, let's do the next one here. The next one's very similar. So the last comment, what we want to sort by with last comment is a last comment date. So we don't want to do a string search here. We want to do a date search. But again, that value is based on this like relationship that like it has many relationships. There's many comments per want. And we got to find the last comment, so whatever one happened most recently, and then sort by that. So I'll show you how to do that. It's very similar to what we just did. Copy and paste this, and then we can look at it. Okay, so scope order by last comment date. So we're doing an order by descending this time because we want to show the newest ones first, I believe is what I'm going for. And then again, grab the created at date for the comment for that, getting all the comments for this want. And again, latest. So this is just like what we did up here with our get last comment ID, except the only thing different this time is we're grabbing the created at value here instead of the ID. And then we're going to take one. Again, the take one in this case is important because there's multiple comments per want. Okay, so we reload this here and we get right here, February 23rd at 6:48. And then that looks right because here's another one a little bit earlier in the day, and then February 22nd. So if we go all the way back to the last page here, let's see how far back in time I went, 2015. So that's working. That's exactly what we'd want. Okay, and if you're wondering, like, well, what if I wanted to sort in the opposite direction? There's absolutely ways to do that as well. Like if you had like the direction here, right? You could get rid of this order by descending here, and you could put this in as a second, I think it's a second value here. And let me just look at what they actually, yeah. So they do direction equals ascending. So if you put direction equals ascending there, think that should work. It should sort in the opposite direction. And if we were to change that to descending or pass it through from our controller, it's going to sort it the direction we want. So you can even you can easily control the direction of these subquery order bys as well. Okay. All right, so let's look at the status one. Now you might think, oh, the status one's pretty straightforward. We're just sorting by the status, and it is a string value right on the wants table. But if we look at that, it's kind of an interesting little thing because, yes, it is a simple string sort, and we're going to sort by descending. And the reason why, so let's just do that. We're going to sort by descending because I want it to show requested first, then planned, then completed. Now, it just so happens that the statuses in my particular app work out properly, where if I sort by descending, it's going to show completed last. So if we go on this last page here, we'll see the completed ones, right? And then it's going to show the planned ones. So if I go on page, I think it's page 13, the planned ones end up, right? The planned ones. And then it's going to show at the beginning here, obviously, the requested ones, because alphabetically it works out that way. That isn't always going to be the case. That happened to work out just nicely in this application, which that's a win. Here's a little check mark. If you have that in your application, sometimes you get easy wins, but more often than not, that's not going to be the case. So how would you do it if it wasn't nicely sorted alphabetically? And this is pretty easy to do. We're going to use, and this is always scary when you see the word raw come out, but I do think it's good to become familiar with making raw queries. And the danger always is with raw is like, well, am I adding SQL injection issues into my application? And you certainly can if you're not careful with raw, especially if you're binding parameters or not binding parameters and putting them right in there. But in this case, like there is no parameter binding involved. We're just writing a query, and there's nothing that could be dangerous about this at all. So what we're doing here is we're saying order by raw, and we're gonna have it's a case statement, and we're saying when the status equals requested, well then we want to position 1, planned position 2, completed position 3, right? Which is what we want. So let's reload this here, and that works exactly like it did before. Okay. However, what if for whatever reason the app, the alphabet, like the order didn't work, or for whatever reason we want to show when we're listing these, we want to show planned first. Okay. What we can actually do here is we go and say for planned, instead of putting 2 there, let's put 0 there instead, which is going to bump it up to first, right? Now hit reload here, and now you'll see that planned second and plans first, requested second, and completed is now third. So that's a really, really simple way where you can just use a case statement to assign your own order ranking to some statuses. And this is Postgres syntax. It might be a little bit different in MySQL or in SQLite, but I think you'd easily enough be able to figure that out. Yeah. Okay. So let's go. We're 1 to go here, and I think we're just in on time, so that's good. So we want to sort by the activity, and this would actually probably be the default column that you'd want to sort by in an application like this. And what we want to have happen is we want to have whatever the most upvoted and most commented wants listed first, all the way to like the least commented and least interesting ones, least upvoted ones last. But it's kind of a tricky thing, right? Because we can't just sort by the upvotes, because we want to sort by the or just sort by the comments. We actually want to sort by the two of them joined together, the total of the two of them. But I even want to go a step further than that. I don't even want to just sort by them combined. So let's say we want to sort by the total upvotes plus we want to sort by combined the total comments. But what we want to say in this application is we say, well, if somebody's commenting, if a want has comments, it's even, let's put a higher weight to that. Let's say comments are worth more than upvotes. So, and we'll do that by we'll just say by order 2. So if whatever it is, we're gonna join together all the upvotes and all the total comments, and then the comments we're gonna multiply by 2 to give them a higher ranking. Okay. So you might be thinking, well, how on earth would you go about doing this in the database layer? And it might be something you'd almost be like kind of be intimidated by, and you may be thinking, well, I got to go now and do this in PHP because I know how to do it there. But then you run into the whole pagination issue and all sorts of other performance problems. So let me show you how you can actually do this. Actually, I'll leave that there. Grab this chunk of code here and then let's talk about it. Okay. So what we're going to do here first, before I even talk about it, I'll just prove to you that it works. So reload here again, only 6 database queries. Models still look right. And you can see here that it's working exactly as expected. 249 thumbs ups, 48 comments. This one here, 244, 50. So you can see this one right here has more upvotes, more votes than this one. But it had less comments than this one, so it got ranked lower. So this is working. If we go all the way to the last page here, we can see here this useless idea right here only has 18 thumbs up and 2 comments. So the ranking's working properly. So let's look at this, see how we did this. And all we're really doing is we're just using a couple subqueries and a bit of math. So what we're saying is these two are identical, these two queries. The only difference is one of them is for a vote and one of them is for a comment. So we're saying give us the count of all the votes for this want, and then give us give us the count of all the comments for this want. So we actually die and dump out what this query looks like here. It's pretty standard SQL. Select count star from votes where the vote matches the want. Okay. And then I'm taking those two pieces of SQL and I'm just doing an order by raw where I execute the votes subquery and I execute the comments subquery to get the counts for each of these individually. And then I'm multiplying the comments count, whatever the result of that is, by 2, and then I'm sorting the whole thing descending. Okay, so let me just show you, just to really prove it to you, kind of like how this is working. What we're going to do is we're going to actually add this value here that we're computing in order by, and I'm going to add it as an actual column. So I'm just going to do the exact same thing. We're going to alias it to the activity column. And what we'll do is we will also actually go to our want thing, our want blade template, and we'll go to where the votes and the comments are shown, and we'll just real messy here inline this to just kind of prove it to you. Want activity. Okay, so we're just going to get the activity and we reload this here, and you can see here we now have that value: 345, 344, 330, 326, 324. So it's ranking it properly. So here you can see we have 50 comments. So 50 multiplied by 2 is 100. And then adding 244 to that gives us 344. So that's working. So that's great. So yeah, that's pretty much all I had for you all today. I hope you found that helpful. I know that's a lot of info in a really short period of time, and there's a lot going on there. I've written about this stuff extensively on my blog, reinink.ca/articles. All these concepts are all in there. And I'm also working, as I announced last year at Laracon US, I'm working on a course called Eloquent Performance Patterns, which you can also find on my website, eloquent-course.reinink.ca. So, by all means, if this interests you and you want to learn more about some of these patterns, go there and throw your email address in. Because I hope to have that course out within the next few months, which I'm super excited about because this is content I've been working on for quite some time now, and I'm really happy with kind of how some of these concepts are coming together. Just in general, again, just to wrap this up, install the Laravel Debug Bar, enable the models feature so you can keep track of how many models are actually being hydrated for each one of your endpoints. Super, super important. The other thing I think, as much as possible, do your database optimizations at the perimeter, at the outset, in your controllers. I think trying to do those things in your resources, trying to do those things in your models, or even in your views, you're going to run into performance issues because that deeper nested code does not understand the full context of those requests. So definitely give that a try. And as much as possible, push more work to the database layer. A lot of the things we're doing here are really, really well suited for the database. The database is amazing at looking up data, filtering data, sorting data, ordering data. It's really good at those things. So don't try to do those things in PHP because it means having to pass a lot more data over the wire and then having to do it in PHP. And frankly, don't do it in PHP because your database is better suited for that work. So thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that.
All right. That was great. I totally agree. I think like I'm being in a more old school database type myself. I think it's common to just get in there and, just use Eloquent and not really think about it, but we make a few raw queries here and there. I love a sub-select. Give me a good sub-select any day. Like make a huge difference. And yeah, so I think getting that extra layer of knowledge there is super, super important, especially when you do get your application gets a little bit bigger. You kind of have to do those things. You can't be dumping a bunch of data back to PHP. It's just a disaster. So.
Yep. Yeah, I think people underestimate the amount of time that it just takes to get data from your database to your web server.
Right.
Like there's time where it needs to transfer. And it's fine if you're maybe on a Forge server where you have your database right on your web server. So it's like all local. But like more and more we're using like with Vapor, or if you're on Heroku, your database is often not on the same physical server as your web servers. So it literally needs to pass over like HTTP and all that data needs to be moved over. And that takes time over the wire.
Yep.
So anytime you can minimize the amount of data you're passing across, your application is going to go faster.
Yep. All right. Great stuff, man. Really appreciate it.
Cool. I guess we don't have time for questions because.
No, we're good on questions, but there's a couple in there for you. So definitely check out the chat.
Have a great day, everyone. Enjoy the conference.